Storytelling is not a talent. It's a skill. And once you learn it, people listen differently. A single story can change a room. A single sentence can change a mind. In the next 1 hour, you will learn how to speak in a way that holds attention, stirs emotion, and leaves a mark inside the listener. This book will teach you the rhythm, the flow, and the emotional depth that makes storytelling unforgettable. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, because this journey will sharpen your voice, shape your message, and transform the way you connect with people. Chapter 1: The Heartbeat of Every Story. Every story begins with a feeling. Not with words, not with technique, with feeling. That feeling is the heartbeat. It's the pulse that turns simple sentences into something alive. Before a story reaches the ears, it must reach the heart of the storyteller first. If you don't feel it, your listener never will. Storytelling starts long before the words come out. It begins in the quiet space inside you, where your memories, emotions, scars, and strengths live together. Every storyteller draws from that space. That is the place where authenticity is born, because people don't connect to perfect stories. They connect to honest ones. The first step to mastering storytelling is understanding that a story is not entertainment. It's communication with emotion. It's connection without force. It's sharing without pressure. A story says what ordinary words cannot. It shows what explanations fail to reveal. It allows people to feel instead of analyze. Great storytellers understand this. They don't chase fancy language. They chase emotional truth. And truth is simple. It's raw. It's real. Storytelling becomes powerful when it's grounded in human reality. The kind of reality that everyone understands, even if the situations are different. People may forget details, but they never forget how a story made them feel. Emotion is memory. Emotion is impact. Emotion is communication at its deepest level. To master storytelling, you must learn to speak with emotion without losing clarity. You must learn to carry feeling in your tone without drowning the message. You must learn to balance heart and structure so the listener can follow you easily while still being moved. This balance begins with awareness. Awareness of what you're trying to say. Awareness of why you're saying it. Awareness of how it will land on the listener. A story is not about you. It passes through you, but it lives inside the person who hears it. So the first rule of storytelling is this: keep the listener in your mind while keeping honesty in your voice. Your tone carries weight. Your pauses carry meaning. Your flow carries emotion. The rhythm of your storytelling should feel like breathing, not rushed, not forced, just natural. A natural rhythm invites trust, and trust allows your story to go deeper. Every great story has a beginning that opens the door, a middle that carries the listener across the bridge, and an end that lets them land gently. But the feeling you carry through the story, that's what makes them stay. Emotion doesn't mean drama. It doesn't mean shouting. It doesn't mean exaggeration. Emotion means presence. It means you are fully inside the moment you are describing. When you describe a moment from your past, don't just narrate the event. Return to the feeling. Let your tone carry the memory. Not loudly, but quietly, honestly. Honesty has a sound. People can hear it instantly. The reason people stop listening to some storytellers is because they sense disconnect. The voice says one thing, but the emotion says another. A great storyteller aligns the two. The voice matches the feeling matches the moment. This alignment is what pulls the listener deeper. But emotional connection is only one part. The next part is clarity. Your story must be easy to follow. If the listener loses the thread, you lose the impact. Clarity comes from simplicity. Short sentences, clean flow, moments placed in the right order. A story should unfold like a gentle path, one step at a time, each step leading naturally to the next. Don't rush. Don't jump. Let the listener walk with you. When you tell a story, you're not performing. You're guiding someone through an emotional landscape. Your role is not to impress. Your role is to connect. Connection creates impact. Impact creates memory. And memory is what storytelling is all about. People don't remember facts. They remember feelings. They remember images. They remember energy. This chapter is your foundation. If you understand the principles here, every technique you learn later will become stronger, sharper, more effective. Because everything in storytelling, tone, pacing, structure, emotion, voice, all of it begins with the same root. The story must come from a real place. Not perfect, not polished, just real. That realness is your power. It's what turns a storyteller into someone unforgettable. Not because of talent, but because of truth. Remember this, a story is a gift. When you tell one, you are giving someone a part of your mind, your experience, your understanding. Treat that gift with care. Carry it with presence. Deliver it with emotion. This is the heartbeat of every great story. And once you understand this heartbeat, you are no longer just speaking. You are storytelling. Chapter 2, Finding Your Story Voice. Every storyteller has a voice. Not the voice you speak with, but the voice you speak from. It is the tone behind your words, the emotion behind your rhythm, the identity behind your sentences. Your storytelling voice is not born. It is discovered, slowly, quietly, through awareness, repetition, and truth. Everyone tries to sound like someone else at the beginning. They imitate speakers, they admire. They copy writers they follow. They repeat styles they didn't create. But real storytelling begins when imitation ends. When you stop sounding like others and start sounding like yourself. Your voice is already inside you. You just haven't listened to it deeply enough. This chapter is about finding that voice, the one that feels natural, honest, and emotionally powerful, the one people remember, the one people trust. A story becomes alive, not because of its words, but because of the voice carrying them. Your voice is your fingerprint, unique, recognizable, impossible to duplicate, and once you find it, your storytelling becomes effortless. It stops being performance. It becomes expression. A storyteller without a voice sounds mechanical. A storyteller with a voice sounds human. Human always wins. Finding your voice begins with slowing down. You must stop rushing your sentences. Stop forcing emotion. Stop trying to sound dramatic. True voice is not dramatic. It's grounded. It's calm. It's deeply present. Presence is the home of your voice. When you speak from presence, your words carry weight without effort. Presence means you are here, fully, completely, in your body, in your breath, in your mind. That presence gives your voice depth. There is a difference between someone who talks and someone who speaks from presence. One sounds like information. The other sounds like truth. Truth has a sound. You must train your voice to sound like truth. Not by adding power, but by removing noise. Noise is insecurity. Noise is fear. Noise is trying too hard. When you strip away that noise, your voice becomes clear, simple, steady, real. Your storytelling voice is not shaped by volume. It is shaped by intention. It is not formed by grammar. It is formed by emotion. It is not defined by perfection. It is defined by presence. Practice speaking slowly. Feel each sentence in your chest before releasing it. Let your breath guide the rhythm. A voice that rushes loses connection. A voice that breathes builds connection. Breath is rhythm. Rhythm is emotion. Emotion is storytelling. This is how your voice grows. Through awareness of sound. Through consistency of tone. Through emotional honesty. The second part of finding your voice is understanding your natural storytelling temperature. Some storytellers have a warm voice, gentle, soft, comforting. Their stories feel like evening light. Their tone invites calmness. Some storytellers have a bright voice, energetic, lively, expressive. Their stories feel like morning sun. Their tone awakens curiosity. Some have a deep voice, slow, thoughtful, steady. Their stories feel like quiet rivers. Their tone invites reflection. Some have a sharp voice, crisp, clean, precise. Their stories feel like clear sky. Their tone invites clarity. None of these are better than the others. Each one has its own magic, its own impact, its own emotional color. Your job is not to change your voice. Your job is to reveal it. You reveal it by paying attention to how you naturally speak. When you're comfortable, when you're calm, when you're honest, when you're not trying to impress. That natural tone, that is your storytelling voice. Now you must strengthen it. Strengthening happens through practice, but not the mechanical kind. Not through memorizing scripts, not through copying other storytellers, not through forcing emotion. Strengthening happens through real expression. Tell personal moments, recall real memories, describe moments you lived, share emotions you felt. Every real story you tell strengthens your voice, like muscle being exercised. Fake stories weaken your voice because they disconnect you from authenticity. Authenticity is the power source of storytelling. When your story is true to you, emotionally true, mentally true, humanly true, your voice becomes magnetic, and people can feel it. Listeners can sense when a storyteller is honest. They lean forward. They breathe slower. They stay with you, because your truth becomes their truth for a moment. The third part of finding your voice is learning the emotional flow of storytelling. Storytelling is not about flat tone. Your voice must rise, fall, pause, breathe. Emotion flows in waves. Let your voice follow those waves, but never overact, never exaggerate, never force excitement. Forced storytelling is noise. Natural storytelling is art. Your voice must feel like the moment itself, not louder, not quieter, just aligned. Alignment creates emotional sync between you and the listener. This sync is the secret to unforgettable stories. When the listener feels what you feel, in the exact moment you feel it, your story becomes an experience, not just words. Your voice guides that experience. Every pause creates anticipation. Every soft tone creates intimacy. Every deep tone creates seriousness. Every slow moment creates reflection. Every smooth transition creates connection. Your voice is not just sound. It is the emotional vehicle of your story. The final step to finding your voice is trusting it. Most storytellers lose power because they don't trust their natural tone. They doubt their pace. They judge their sound. They compare themselves to others. Comparison kills voice. Your voice becomes powerful the moment you stop judging it and start owning it. Own your tone. Own your rhythm. Own your energy. Own your emotional truth. Your voice is not meant to please everyone. It is meant to reach the right ones. Readers, listeners, audiences. They don't want perfection. They want presence. They want honesty. They want emotion. And that comes only when your voice is yours. When you find your voice, you stop sounding like you're telling a story and start sounding like you're living it. Living stories leave impact. This chapter is your transformation, your shift from speaking to storytelling. Your voice is the tool. Your story is the message. Your emotion is the power, but your truth, that is the soul. And once your storytelling voice carries your truth, not just your words, you don't just communicate, you connect. And when you connect, the listener remembers you long after the story ends. Chapter 3. Painting pictures with your words. A story lives twice, once inside your mind and once inside the listener's imagination. Your job as a storyteller is to create that second life, to make people see what you see, feel what you feel, and walk where you walked. Words alone cannot do this. Pictures created inside the mind can. Storytelling is the art of transferring images from your memory into someone else's imagination. This is what makes stories unforgettable. Not the grammar, not the vocabulary, not the length, the pictures, the atmosphere, the emotion. When you tell a story, you're not sharing events, you're painting moments. Every moment has a texture, a color, a temperature, a feeling, a weight. When you learn to describe these with simplicity and emotion, your story becomes alive. People stop just listening. They start seeing. That shift is the magic. Because once a listener begins to see your story, they no longer feel like outsiders. They become part of the moment. Great storytellers create shared experience. They make people forget they are listening. They pull them into a different time, a different place, a different feeling. To create that pull, you must use details that carry emotion. Not heavy details, not too many details, just the right ones, the ones that help the moment breathe. A single detail can transform a plain sentence into a vivid memory. The room was silent. That is information. But the room felt so quiet that even my breath sounded loud. That is experience. One line creates a picture. The other creates a feeling. Feelings stay longer than facts. Your audience will not remember every sentence you say, but they will remember the sensation your story gave them. That sensation comes from imagery. Imagery is not decoration. It is the bridge between your world and theirs. When you tell a story, choose details that are simple, but emotionally charged. Instead of describing everything, describe what matters to the moment. Your listener does not need to know what color every wall was, what brand of shoes you wore, what time the clock showed. But they do need to know why your heart tightened, why your voice softened, why the room suddenly felt lighter or heavier. Emotionally meaningful details create cinematic storytelling. A cinematic story moves like a camera. Sometimes it zooms in on a trembling hand, a quiet breath, the sudden pause. Sometimes it zooms out to show the room, the environment, the energy around you. Sometimes it focuses on a sound, a door closing, a heartbeat rising, a sentence floating in the air. Sometimes it focuses on a feeling, tension, relief, fear, hope. This is how storytelling becomes visual. People don't remember your exact words. They remember the movie their mind created. Your job is to direct that movie. To do that, you must speak with rhythm. Rhythm is the pulse of storytelling. Short lines create tension. Longer lines create flow. Pauses create impact. Soft tone creates intimacy. Stable tone creates clarity. When your rhythm matches the moment, the listener feels aligned with your story. If the moment is gentle, your voice becomes soft. If the moment is heavy, your words slow down. If the moment is intense, your sentences become shorter, sharper, tighter. Storytelling is not one tone. It is many tones, blended with intention. Your goal is not to sound dramatic. Your goal is to sound real. Real moments carry natural rhythm. Follow that rhythm. Do not force it. You don't need complicated metaphors. You need meaningful moments. When you describe a moment, ask yourself, what is the feeling here? Then use simple language to reveal that feeling. If the moment feels cold, describe the air. If the moment feels tense, describe the silence. If the moment feels uncertain, describe the hesitation in your steps. These small pieces create large impact. A good storyteller doesn't say, I was nervous. A good storyteller shows it. I could feel my fingers locking together, as if they were trying to hide the fear I didn't want anyone else to see. This paints a picture. This invites the listener in. This makes the moment human. Human moments are unforgettable. Your audience is not looking for perfection. They are looking for themselves inside your story. When you describe your moments honestly, your listener finds their own memories inside your words. They see their own fear, their own hope, their own struggle, their own courage. This is connection. This is why stories move people. The best storytellers know that simplicity is strength. You don't need flowery sentences. You need truthful sentences. Say what is real. Say what is felt. Say what is human. Honesty is the strongest imagery. And then comes the second layer, atmosphere. Atmosphere is the emotional climate of your story. It is the mood that holds the listener, the invisible temperature of your storytelling. A story can feel heavy, warm, cold, bright, confusing, hopeful. The atmosphere creates that feeling. You build atmosphere through tone, through pacing, through emotional hints, through the way you let moments unfold. If the moment is tense, you slow it down. If the moment is joyful, you let it rise like sunlight. If the moment is painful, you speak softly, because softness carries honesty. Atmosphere turns simple moments into powerful scenes. Scenes are the building blocks of storytelling. A story is not one big block. It is a series of emotional scenes. Each scene must breathe, must carry its own weight, must feel like a complete moment. When you move from one scene to the next, you guide your listener over a gentle bridge. Never jump. Flow is everything. A great storyteller never lets the listener feel the transition. It happens naturally. One emotion shades into another. One image melts into the next. This is storytelling mastery. And mastering this requires practice. But the practice is not mechanical. It is emotional. You practice noticing life. You practice feeling moments. You practice observing the small details that carry the weight of the story. Life speaks to storytellers who are willing to listen. The more you notice, the more you can describe. The more you feel, the more you can express. The more you observe, the more cinematic your stories become. People think storytelling is about speaking. It is not. It is about seeing. When you see life clearly, you describe it clearly. When you describe it clearly, people experience it with you. And that experience is storytelling at its highest level. You are no longer giving information. You are giving the listener a moment to live inside. That moment becomes memory. That memory becomes emotion. That emotion becomes connection. And connection is the goal. Always. This chapter teaches you the heart of visual storytelling. But the next chapter will teach you something deeper. How to create emotional arcs that pull people forward. Because every great story leads somewhere. It carries the listener. It transforms them as they travel with you. And to create that transformation, you need emotional direction. That direction begins in Chapter 4. Chapter 4, building emotional arcs that pull the listener forward. Every great story moves. Not fast, not slow, but with purpose. This movement is the emotional arc. It is the invisible curve that carries your listener from the beginning of the story to the end of the moment. Without an emotional arc, the story feels flat. It feels like a list of moments, disconnected, empty, forgettable. But when the emotional arc flows naturally, the listener travels with you, step by step, breath by breath, feeling by feeling. This is what separates ordinary stories from unforgettable ones. Every story has two journeys, the journey of events and the journey of emotions. Events are what happen. Emotions are what those events mean. Listeners follow emotions, not events. When you understand this, your storytelling changes permanently. You stop focusing on what happened next and start focusing on what that moment created inside me. That internal movement is the emotional arc. A good storyteller reveals that movement, slowly, smoothly, gently guiding the listener from one emotional state to another. Not with dramatic words, not with exaggerated tone, with honesty, with presence, with emotional clarity. Every emotional arc has three phases: the rise, the center, the release. Not as rules, but as natural patterns in the rhythm of human experience. The rise is the moment something begins shifting, a feeling growing, a tension forming, a hope appearing, a fear waking up. Your voice becomes slightly tighter, slightly slower, slightly heavier. You create awareness without announcing it. You don't say, "I started getting nervous." You let the moment show itself. My breath began to feel different, like it was trying to slow me down before the moment arrived. That is the rise. Small, quiet, powerful. Then comes the center, the heart of the emotional arc. This is where the listener feels what you felt, not because you tell them, but because your words carry the weight of the moment. At the center, your tone becomes steady, not loud, not soft, balanced, fully present. This is where the scene breathes, where the emotion becomes clear, where the listener stops listening and starts experiencing. Then comes the release, the quiet exhale, the shift, the moment when the emotion settles into understanding. Release is not always resolution. Sometimes release is acceptance, sometimes realization, sometimes peace, sometimes a gentle sadness. But release must feel natural, not forced, not overly tidy, just human. When these three phases flow smoothly, your story becomes emotionally complete. Listeners don't just hear the story, they travel through it. They rise with you, stand in the center with you, and release with you. This is emotional storytelling. This is connection. Your job is not to create drama. Your job is to guide the emotional arc, the way life naturally guides emotions. Life doesn't jump. Life builds. Life unfolds. Life releases. Your story should feel the same. To create emotional arcs, you must understand pacing. Pacing is the speed of feeling, not the speed of talking. When the moment is heavy, you slow it down. You let the silence inside your words carry the weight. When the moment is bright, your sentences flow more freely. You let the energy breathe. This pacing tells the listener how to feel the moment. You don't instruct them. You guide them. This is the difference between storytelling and explanation. Explanation tells the mind. Storytelling touches the heart. Your emotional arcs must be honest. They must reflect how you actually felt, not how you think you should have felt. Honest arcs create real connection. When you share a moment of fear, share the real fear. When you share a moment of hope, share the fragile hope. When you share a moment of confusion, share the confusion clearly. Truth builds emotional arcs that listeners trust. Trust is everything. Without trust, a listener enjoys your story. With trust, they experience your story. Your voice becomes a guide they lean on. Your rhythm becomes a path they walk with you. Stories become meaningful when the listener trusts your emotional movement. To maintain this trust, you must avoid exaggeration. Exaggeration breaks connection. It sounds unnatural, unreal, performed. Emotional arcs must be subtle, not theatrical. A single line can shift emotion more powerfully than a dramatic speech. I felt my throat tighten, the way it does when a moment suddenly becomes bigger than you expected. This quiet line carries more weight than shouting intensity. Quiet power is the heart of emotional arcs, and listeners feel it instantly. The key to emotional movement is transitions. Transitions are the bridges between one emotional state and the next. If you change mood too quickly, the listener falls out of the story. The bridge breaks. The flow collapses. Smooth transition keep the listener inside the moment. Example of a broken transition. I was nervous. Then suddenly I felt hopeful. This is a jump. It disconnects. Example of a smooth transition. Something inside my nerves softened, as if hope was trying to enter quietly through a small open space I didn't notice before. This is a bridge. This is flow. This is emotional movement. Your emotional arcs must feel like nature, not abrupt, not forced, but gradual, organic, true. Every story you tell should move the listener along a feeling path. Storytelling is emotional transportation, and you are the driver. To drive well, You must know where your story is going emotionally. Not the events, the emotions. Does the story begin with tension and end with relief? Does it begin with confusion and end with clarity? Does it begin with doubt and end with strength? Does it begin with pain and end with acceptance? Every story has its own emotional destination. You must discover it before you speak. The emotional destination makes the arc meaningful. Without a destination, a story feels lost, wandering, directionless. With a destination, even the smallest story feels purposeful. Now you must learn the simplest way to create emotional flow through contrast. Emotion grows through contrast. Light feels brighter because darkness exists. Hope feels warmer because fear exists. Joy feels stronger because struggle exists. Peace feels deeper because chaos exists. If every moment in a story is intense, nothing feels intense. If every moment is calm, nothing feels calm. Contrast shapes emotion. Emotion shapes connection. The balance of contrast creates movement. Your story might begin in a quiet tone, then rise gently as tension appears, then soften suddenly as the moment shifts, then deep as realization comes, then release as understanding settles. This is the emotional dance that keeps listeners involved. Never let your story stay flat. Let it breathe with emotion. Let it rise. Let it fall. Let it settle. Let it evolve. Let it carry the listener. This is the emotional arc. This is your greatest tool. This is the skill that transforms storytelling from speak into experience. The next chapter will teach you how to structure stories using emotional arcs, so every story you tell unfolds with clarity, power, and unforgettable flow. Because Chapter 5 is where your storytelling begins to feel like art. Chapter 5, Shaping Stories with Emotional Structure. Every story needs a spine, not a hard, rigid frame, a gentle inner structure that guides the story from the first breath to the last line. Structure is not about rules. It is about rhythm. It is about direction. It is about using emotion, the way an artist uses color, with intention, with balance, with flow. Without structure, a story becomes scattered. Moments appear, but they don't connect. Feelings rise, but they don't settle. Words move, but they don't land. Structure holds everything together, quietly, subtly, smoothly. Great storytellers know where the story begins emotionally, where it travels, and where it rests. This emotional structure is the map that keeps the listener close. A story is never just words. It is a journey. The listener must feel as if you are guiding through a landscape, one step at a time, one emotion at a time, and every journey needs a path. Your path begins with the spark, the emotional invitation that pulls the listener in. This spark does not have to be dramatic. It only needs to feel alive. A moment, a memory, a shift, a breath, a thought, something small that carries emotional meaning. The spark should feel like, come with me, something matters here. Then comes the rise. The moment the story starts moving, the feeling expands. The room changes tone. The air becomes thicker or lighter. The step becomes slower or quicker. This rise sets the emotional direction. Every story rises differently. Some rise through tension. Some rise through curiosity. Some rise through confusion. Some rise through wonder. Some rise through courage. But every rise must feel natural. The rise opens the door to the heart of the story, the emotional center. The center is the place where the story pauses and breathes deeply. This is where your listener feels the full weight of the moment. Not weight as heaviness, weight as importance, meaning, truth. The center is where everything becomes clear. what you felt, what shifted, what mattered. This is the emotional core. When the listener reaches the core, they feel connected, not because you told them to, but because the story carried them there. After the center comes the fall. The fall is not the ending. It is the emotional descent, the journey down from the intensity towards understanding. The fall allows the listener to release the emotion they just experienced. This release is what makes your story memorable. Every human emotion needs space to settle. The fall gives that space. Then comes the quiet landing, the moment the story rests, the moment everything softens, the moment a gentle clarity appears. This landing is the emotional end. It does not need to be sharp, or dramatic, or loud. It only needs to feel settled. A story without a landing feels unfinished. A story with a gentle landing feels complete. This is the emotional structure of powerful storytelling. Spark, rise, center, fall, landing. These 5 quiet movements all shape the emotional arc, so the listener feels guided through every line. When you speak with this structure, your stories gain weight, not heavy weight, meaningful weight. Your listener starts trusting you. They know you will lead them somewhere. They know you won't drop the moment. They know the story is safe in your hands. This trust creates connection. Connection makes your stories unforgettable. But structure is not mechanical. It is alive. It adapts to the tone of each story. Some stories rise fast and fall slowly. Some stories rise slowly and fall suddenly. Some centers are small, quiet, soft. Some centers are deep, intense, emotional. The structure shapes itself around the story's emotion, not the other way around. A storyteller's biggest mistake is forcing structure. You don't force flow, you guide it. Every moment already has a natural rhythm. You only need to listen closely to find it. When you understand the emotion inside each moment, structure reveals itself. The spark becomes obvious. The rise appears quietly. The center feels heavy or warm. The fall becomes gentle. The landing feels natural. This is storytelling by intuition, not by rules. Intuition grows the more you pay attention to the emotional movement of life. Life is full of sparks, a look, a silence, a memory, an unexpected shift. Life rises through tension, through hope, through uncertainty. Life centers in the moment that changes everything. Life falls into realization, perspective, understanding. Life lands in acceptance, in calm, in clarity. Stories mirror life because stories come from life. You're not creating artificial structure. You're recreating the structure that already exists inside experience. When you speak from this natural flow, your story feels human. Listeners sense the truth in your rhythm. The next part of structure is emotional layering. A story is stronger when emotions do not appear alone. Fear carries a hint of hope. Joy carries a touch of vulnerability. Confusion carries a hint of clarity. Sadness carries a touch of release. These emotional layers make your story multidimensional. Layering happens through subtle hints. A shift in tone, a softer breath, a quiet pause. You don't say the emotion, you show the emotion through the way you speak. Another part of structure is pacing. Pacing is how fast or slow your emotional arc moves. Fast pacing creates urgency. Slow pacing creates depth. Balanced pacing creates connection. You shift pace through sentence length. Short lines tighten the moment. Long lines expand it. Pauses deepen it. Your voice becomes the metronome of the emotional journey. Pacing is not just how you speak. It is how the listener feels. When you sense they are absorbing, you stay. When you sense they are ready, you move. This sensitivity is storytelling intelligence. Then comes refinement. Refinement is the final layer. that shapes the structure. Refinement removes noise, words that don't matter, moments that don't serve, sentences that distract. You refine, not to make your story shorter, but to make your story sharper. Sharp stories cut deeper. Refinement is not editing. It is alignment. You align each sentence to the emotional purpose of the story. The purpose of structure is not control. It is clarity. Structure helps your listener follow your emotional movement without confusion. They don't feel lost. They feel guided. Guided listeners become engaged listeners. Engaged listeners become transformed listeners. This is the power of structure. When your emotional arcs flow within structure, your stories gain both heart and direction. They feel alive, and they feel intentional. At this point, you are no longer just telling a story. You are crafting an emotional experience. This chapter is the turning point between amateur storytelling and professional storytelling. The next chapter will take you deeper into the art of pacing tension, release, and emotional pressure to keep the listener glued to your voice until the final word. Because Chapter 6 is where your storytelling becomes magnetic. Chapter 6. The gravity of tension and release. Every powerful story breathes. It tightens. It softens. It rises. It settles. This movement, tension and release, is the heartbeat of storytelling. Without tension, a story feels empty. Without release, a story feels exhausting. Tension pulls the listener in. Release lets them breathe. Together, they create emotional gravity. Gravity is what keeps the listener locked into the story from beginning to end. You must learn to build it gently, carefully, with respect for the listener's mind. Tension is not loudness. It is not shouting. It is not drama. Tension is pressure. Silent pressure. Emotional pressure. The kind that sits beneath a moment and makes the listener lean forward without realizing it. This pressure rises through quiet signals, the way a sentence shortens, the way a breath hesitates, the way a memory cracks open, very slowly, as if it's fragile. You don't create tension by forcing it. You create tension by revealing something, bit by bit, in a way that feels alive. Tension is the promise that something inside this moment matters. It can be small, a feeling you didn't expect, a word that changed the air, a silence that suddenly felt heavier, a step that slowed down. Small tension is powerful because it feels real, human, honest. Listeners don't need explosions. They need emotional truth. When you create tension through honesty, your story becomes irresistible. Then comes the release. Release is the softening of the moment, the breath returning, the heart settling, the clarity forming. Release is not the end of the story. It is the moment of understanding, the way a knot slowly opens inside the listener's chest. The release is where transformation happens. The listener feels the shift, not because you said it, but because the tension made room for it. Without tension, release has no impact. Without release, tension becomes painful. Balance the two, and your storytelling becomes magnetic. To master tension, you must understand rhythm. Tension grows through slow rhythm, short lines, pauses, small breaths, soft tone with sharp edges. You guide the feeling, like a rising wave, but the rise must be smooth. If you rush, you break the emotional build. If you drag it too long, you lose the listener. Tension must feel natural, like the moment itself is unfolding, without your control. Then, when the moment reaches the peak, you shift the rhythm. You slow down even more. You soften your voice. You let the air settle. This creates release. Release is built through longer lines, gentler tone, softer imagery. It is the emotional exhale after the emotional inhale. This balance is the essence of storytelling. Once you understand it, your stories will never feel flat again. People won't just listen. They will wait for the next rise, for the next fall, for the next breath, for the next release. This waiting is emotional engagement. Engagement is the currency of unforgettable storytelling. But tension and release are not only about the story. They are about the storyteller's voice. Your voice must carry the weight of both pressure and freedom. When you build tension, your voice becomes narrow, focused, quietly intense. Even a small whisper feels like a storm inside. When you give release, your voice opens. It becomes warm, gentle, calm. The contrast makes the moment feel alive. Listeners may not know why the moment feels powerful, but they feel it. Their body responds to your emotional rhythm. This subconscious connection is storytelling mastery. Another thing, tension should never be artificial, never exaggerated, never forced. If the storyteller doesn't feel the moment, the listener won't feel it either. Tension is born from authenticity. Release is born from honesty. When both come from truth, the story becomes unforgettable. You must also learn the subtle art of micro-tension. Micro-tension appears inside the smallest moments. A thought you almost said, a pause you almost filled, a feeling that rose quietly, then disappeared. These tiny pressures pull the listener deeper into your story without them noticing. Mastering micro-tension is what separates good storytellers from great ones. But every tension must be followed by a release. This doesn't mean everything becomes happy. It simply means the emotion shifts. It breathes. It makes room for the next rise. This cycle continues until your story reaches its final shape. Remember this truth. Every story is a spiral, not a straight line, not a perfect curve. A spiral rises and returns, rises and returns, until it finds balance. Tension rises. Release returns. The story breathes. As you breathe, your job is to follow that breath, to feel when the moment tightens and when it softens, to guide the emotion with your voice and your presence. The listener is not following your words. They are following your emotional energy. This is why tension matters. This is why release matters. This is why your storytelling becomes alive. When you master the quiet rise and the gentle fall. Now understand something deeper. Tension and release create transformation. A listener changes because of what they feel inside the story. Stories do not teach through instruction. They teach through experience. The rise creates immersion. The fall creates understanding. The landing creates transformation. This is the emotional architecture behind every story that stays in memory. This chapter teaches you how to feel the emotional waves. The next chapter will teach you how to control your voice so you can deliver these waves with precision, confidence, and power. Because chapter 7 is where your voice becomes your strongest storytelling instrument. Chapter 7. The voice that shapes the story. Every storyteller has a voice. Not the voice that comes from the throat, but the voice that comes from the inner world. This inner voice is the true instrument of storytelling. Words are only the surface. Voice is the soul. A story told without the right voice sounds like information. A story told with the right voice sounds like truth. Your voice carries the emotional weight that the listener feels before they even understand the words. This is why voice is the silent power of storytelling. Most people speak without awareness. They let their voice move the way their thoughts move, fast, scattered, ungrounded. But storytellers speak with intention, with depth, with rhythm, with emotional presence. Your voice must become balanced, not too loud, not too soft, not too flat, not too rushed. A balanced voice holds the listener gently and guides them through every emotional shift. This balance begins with calmness. Calmness is not quietness. Calmness is control. It is the ability to hold your voice steady, even when your story rises in emotion. The listener trusts a calm voice. They open themselves to your words because the voice feels safe. Safety creates connection. Connection creates emotional depth. But calmness does not mean lifelessness. Your voice must carry energy, the kind of energy that feels alive without feeling aggressive. This energy comes. Grounding means your voice comes from your body, not just your mouth. It vibrates in your chest. It rests in your breath. It flows through your posture. When your voice is grounded, your storytelling becomes magnetic. People don't just hear you, they feel you. To find this grounded voice, you must slow down internally. Not your speech, but your mind. A storyteller with a racing mind creates a racing voice, and a racing voice cannot hold emotional depth. Your mind sets the tone for your voice. When your mind is steady, your voice becomes steady. Steadiness builds trust. Trust builds impact. Impact builds memory. Your voice must also learn the art of softness. Softness is not weakness. Softness is emotional clarity. When your voice softens, your listener leans in. Their body instinctively quiets to catch your words. Softness creates intimacy. Intimacy creates connection. But softness must be balanced with strength. A storyteller needs a voice that can rise when emotion rises, that can hold tension without losing control, that can carry weight without becoming heavy. Strength in your voice does not mean pushing volume. It means pushing presence. Presence is force without harshness. It is power without pressure. When you speak with presence, your words feel alive, not loud, not sharp, but deeply rooted. Rooted voices move listeners. Your voice must also carry rhythm, a natural flow that mirrors emotion. Short lines tighten a moment. Longer lines open it. Pauses deepen it. Soft breaths guide it. This rhythm is not random. It is emotional alignment. Your voice should sound like the moment feels. If the moment is gentle, your voice becomes slow and warm. If the moment is heavy, your voice becomes steady and thick. If the moment is rising, your voice gathers quiet pressure. If the moment is releasing, your voice softens. Like a breath of relief, this is the emotional language of storytelling. The listener hears your voice before they hear your story. Their body reacts to tone, to pacing, to rhythm, to shifts. Emotion travels faster than words. If your voice carries emotion honestly, the listener feels the story even before understanding it. This is why voice matters more than vocabulary. A simple sentence with the right voice can create more impact than a complicated sentence spoken without presence. Your voice is the meaning behind the meaning. Now understand something deeper. Your voice changes based on how deeply you feel the story. If you only remember the moment intellectually, your voice becomes thin. If you relive the moment emotionally, your voice becomes layered. Layers make your voice textured. Textured voices make stories unforgettable. Texture comes from subtle shifts, the breath that catches, the tone that cracks slightly, the sound that slows, as if holding something important. These are the signs that your storytelling voice is alive. Listeners respond to what is alive. To awaken your storytelling voice, you must reconnect with yourself. You must know what you feel and why you feel it. You must understand your emotional patterns. You must observe your own inner movement. Your voice is shaped by your emotional awareness. If you ignore your emotions, your voice becomes flat. If you embrace your emotions, your voice becomes powerful. But powerful voice is not dramatic voice. Many beginners confuse the two. Drama tries to impress. Power tries to express. Your voice should never try to impress. When you chase attention, you lose authenticity. Authenticity is the strongest voice a storyteller can have. Authenticity is the voice listeners trust instantly, without thinking, because authentic voices sound human. Human always wins. This is why your storytelling voice must be built on honesty. Honesty in tone, honesty in rhythm, honesty in emotion, honesty in presence. Honesty is felt, not heard. A single honest line can touch deeper than a long dramatic paragraph. When your voice is honest, your listener feels safe in your story. Safety allows them to feel. Feeling allows them to connect. Connection allows them to remember. Voice creates this chain. Your voice is also shaped by silence. Silence is part of your storytelling. A moment of stillness can express more emotion than a long sentence. Silence builds tension. Silence gives space. Silence holds meaning. Your voice becomes stronger when it works with silence instead of against it. Most storytellers fear silence. Fear makes them rush. They fill every second with words. But powerful storytellers respect silence. They let silence breathe. They let silence carry emotion without interruption. A story without silence feels suffocated. A story with silence feels alive. Silence is the softest part of your voice. Your voice must also learn the art of consistency. Consistency means your tone stays grounded even as the story moves. You don't lose stability when emotion rises. You don't lose focus when tension builds. Consistency makes your listener trust that you are in control of the emotional journey. This control does not mean rigidity. It means stability. Your voice is the anchor that keeps the story from drifting. Now understand the deepest truth. Your voice is not just a sound. It is your emotional signature. It carries your life, your experiences, your memories, your wounds, your healing, your growth. Every storyteller brings their history into their voice. This history gives depth, gives weight, gives authenticity. The more you accept your story, the stronger your storytelling voice becomes. Your voice becomes a mirror that reflects your humanity in every line. This chapter is the foundation of vocal identity. The next chapter will show you how to use this voice to hold attention, create presence, and command silence in any storytelling moment. Because in Chapter 8, you will learn how to build aura, the atmosphere around your voice that makes people stop and listen. Chapter 8. The aura of a storyteller. A voice can speak, but an aura can hold. Aura is the quiet force that surrounds your presence. Before a single word leaves your mouth, it is the invisible field that makes people pay attention, not because they are forced to, but because something in you pulls them closer. A storyteller with aura can silence a room without raising a hand, without raising a voice, with nothing more than presence. Presence is not noise. Presence is stillness. Stillness that carries weight. Stillness that carries intention. Stillness that carries emotional truth. Aura is the emotional atmosphere you create around your voice. Your story lives inside this atmosphere. If the atmosphere is weak, your voice cannot land. If the atmosphere is strong, your voice becomes unforgettable. Aura begins with internal clarity. You must know why you're telling the story, not for attention, not for approval, not to impress. You tell a story because the moment deserves to breathe, because the listener deserves the truth, because the emotion deserves expression. When your intention is clean, your aura becomes clean. Listeners feel it instantly. People can sense when a storyteller is aligned with what they are saying. Alignment creates power. Your aura grows when your voice matches your emotion, when your emotion matches your purpose, and when your purpose matches your truth. Aura is authenticity made visible. Listeners are drawn to what feels real. To build aura, You must slow down the pace of your presence. Don't rush into the story. Don't jump into the first sentence. Let your breath arrive. Let your shoulders settle. Let your voice find its ground. A grounded beginning creates an aura of control. Control does not mean stiffness. Control is gentleness, guided by strength. A storyteller with aura never looks like they are trying. They simply are. Effortless expression is the highest form of storytelling. Your aura also depends on your emotional stillness. Stillness is not silence. Stillness is inner quiet. It is the absence of emotional noise. When your inner world is calm enough to hold the weight of a story, people feel safe listening. Safety makes the listener open. Openness makes the story enter deeper. The more still you are inside, the louder your presence becomes outside. Aura does not come from force. It comes from alignment. It also comes from intention. In your eyes. Eyes are storytelling instruments. They carry emotional weight without words. A storyteller with wandering eyes breaks the aura. A storyteller with steady eyes holds the aura. Steady does not mean intense. It means present. Presence in the eyes is presence in the story. Listeners follow your eyes into the emotional landscapes you create. Your aura becomes stronger when your eyes and voice speak the same emotional truth. Aura also comes from the space between your words. Pauses are where your aura breathes. A pause is not emptiness. A pause is attention. When you pause intentionally, you create anticipation. The listener leans forward. Their mind clears. The story thickens. Pauses create aura. The way shadows create depth in a painting. Without pauses, your story becomes flat. With pauses, your story becomes dimensional. Aura is depth. Depth is created when your voice and your silence work together. Another element of aura is emotional certainty. Certainty means you believe every word you speak, not exaggeration, not overacting, not theatrical confidence, just calm, steady belief. When you believe your words, listeners believe your story. Certainty has a sound, a tone, a vibration. Even simple sentences carry more weight when they are spoken from emotional certainty. The listener can hear it. Their body responds to the tone of belief. Aura is not built by speaking loudly. It is built by speaking truthfully. Truth has gravity. Gravity pulls people in, not with force, but with emotional weight. As your storytelling evolves, your aura becomes more visible. You begin to speak, not from your throat, but from your center. You begin to tell stories, not from memory, but from presence. You begin to express emotion, not through drama, but through depth. Depth is the foundation of aura, and depth is created by understanding your own emotions clearly. A storyteller with shallow emotional awareness has weak aura. Their stories sound thin. Their moments feel hollow. A storyteller who knows their own feelings with honesty and clarity creates strong aura. Listeners trust storytellers who understand themselves. Your voice becomes believable. When your emotions are real, your emotions become real. When your presence is rooted, your aura expands. This expansion is not visible. It is felt. Felt in the quiet. Felt in the breath. Felt in the stillness of attention. Aura is the silent connection between you and your listener. When your aura is strong, the listener becomes part of the story. They don't just hear your words. They enter your emotional space. You become the guide. They become the witness. Storytelling becomes shared experience. Shared experience is the highest form of connection. Your aura also depends on the emotional intention behind your delivery. If your intention is to impress, your aura weakens. If your intention is to express, your aura strengthens. Expression is truth. Impression is performance. Performance shifts the focus from the story to the storyteller. Expression shifts the focus from the storyteller to the emotion. Emotion is the heart of storytelling. Your aura becomes magnetic when your purpose is to deliver emotion with honesty. Honest voices carry the strongest aura. To strengthen your aura, you must practice presence. Presence means you are not thinking about yourself while speaking. You are thinking about the moment. Self-consciousness weakens aura. Moment consciousness strengthens aura. When you disappear, the story appears. When the story appears, the listener enters fully. This full entry is the result of aura. Aura is not style. Aura is authenticity. Authenticity is timeless. It never loses its power. People remember storytellers, not for their performance, but for their presence. Presence is felt, not taught, not memorized, not faked. It is built slowly, through emotional honesty, through grounded voice, through steady rhythm, through clear intention, through deep awareness. And as it grows, your storytelling changes forever. Chapter 8 is where you learn the invisible side of storytelling, the part that cannot be seen, but is always felt. The next chapter will take this deeper, showing you how aura transforms into authority, how presence becomes influence, and how your voice becomes a tool of persuasion. Because chapter 9 is where your storytelling begins to command attention on its own. Chapter 9, the authority of your storytelling presence. Authority begins long before the story. It begins in the storyteller. Authority is not dominance. It is not power over others. It is not loudness. It is not force. Real authority is calm. It is steady. It is quiet strength that flows through your voice, like an unshakable foundation. Listeners trust authority, not because it demands attention, but because it deserves attention. A storyteller with authority. Patty does not speak to impress. They speak with purpose. Purpose creates direction. Direction creates clarity. Clarity creates trust. Trust is the root of authority. When a storyteller speaks with authority, the room naturally shifts. People pay attention without being asked. They lean in without realizing it. They follow without effort. Authority is presence, shaped by confidence and truth. Confidence does not mean perfection. Confidence means you stand inside your story fully. You are not unsure. You are not pretending. You are not performing. You are expressing exactly what is alive inside you. This authenticity creates natural authority. Listeners trust the storyteller, who trusts themselves. If you doubt your own story, the listener doubts it. If you stand inside your story, the listener stands with you. Authority comes from internal certainty, not ego, not arrogance, not pressure. Certainty. Certainty is quiet. It does not shout. It does not demand. It simply exists with unwavering clarity. Your storytelling voice must carry this quiet certainty. This certainty grows from emotional ownership. Emotional ownership means you fully accept your experiences, the good, the painful, the confusing, the transformative. When you own your story owns the room. Authority is not about control. It is about alignment. Alignment between your words and your truth. This alignment creates resonance. Resonance is when your voice vibrates with meaning that reaches inside the listener and settles there. Listeners may not understand why your story feels powerful, but they feel the vibration of truth and certainty in your voice. This vibration is emotional authority. To strengthen your authority, you must learn the emotional discipline of your voice. Emotional discipline means your voice stays steady. Even when the story becomes heavy, your tone stays grounded. Even when emotions rise, your rhythm stays clear. Even when memories shake. This steadiness does not remove emotion. It allows emotion to be heard without overwhelming the listener. Authority is the bridge between emotional depth and emotional clarity. When your voice holds both, the listener experiences trust. Trust is your greatest storytelling currency. When the listener trusts you, your story enters deeper. Your message lands stronger. Your presence feels larger. Authority also grows from the way you handle silence. Most speakers fear silence. They rush through it, filling every second with words. But storytellers with authority respect silence. They let silence speak. They let silence carry meaning. They let silence deepen emotion. Silence is not the absence of voice. Silence is part of the voice. A silent moment after a heavy line can create more impact than a whole paragraph. This is the authority of stillness. To master authority, you must embrace pacing. Authority does not rush. Authority does not stumble. Authority moves with rhythm that communicates confidence. Short lines tighten attention. Long lines expand the moment. Pauses deepen reflection. Your pacing becomes the emotional guide. When your pacing is controlled, your authority feels natural. Listeners follow rhythm more than they follow words. If your rhythm is steady, your influence grows. Your storytelling authority is also shaped by emotional neutrality. Neutrality does not mean lack of emotion. Neutrality means you do not let emotion dominate your delivery. You feel the moment, but do not become overwhelmed. You express deeply, but do not lose structure. You remain grounded. Even when the story trembles, this emotional neutrality creates dignity. Dignity creates authority. A storyteller with dignity does not force emotions onto the listener. They allow the listener to experience emotion in their own way. Authority is not loud. Authority is spacious. Space gives the listener room to feel the story. When you give that room, you gain their respect. Respect becomes connection. Connection becomes influence. Influence becomes authority. Your presence must also carry emotional patience. Patience means you do not push the story forward before it is ready. You let the moment unfold. You let the emotion build. You let the realization land. You let the story breathe. Impatience weakens authority. Patience strengthens it. People trust someone who does not rush their own story. Authority grows further when your tone is emotionally consistent. Consistency means your voice aligns with your message from beginning to end. If a painful moment arrives, your voice becomes tender, not broken. If a heavy moment arrives, your voice becomes steady, not rigid. If a hopeful moment arrives, your voice becomes warm, not exaggerated. This emotional alignment makes your storytelling appear effortless. Effortlessness is a sign of mastery. Mastery creates authority. A storyteller with mastery does not flaunt technique. They embody it. Listeners feel that something in the storyteller is grounded beyond technique. This grounded energy is your aura of authority. It sits in your chest. It moves through your breath. It lives in your tone. It rests in your stillness. It shines in your confidence. Authority is not something you act. It is something you become, and you become it by embracing all the moments that shaped you. Your failures, your pain, your lessons, your fears, your courage. Everything becomes part of your storytelling voice. When you speak from the fullness of who you are, your authority becomes unshakable. This chapter has given you the foundation to command presence without demanding it. But the next chapter takes this even further, because chapter 10 teaches you how to shape influence, how to move listeners emotionally, and how to guide their minds gently toward transformation. Chapter 10 is where storytelling becomes not just expressive, but transformative. Chapter 10. The subtle power of influential storytelling. Influence begins quietly, not in the words, not in the tone, not in the performance. Influence begins in the intention behind the story. Every storyteller who influences people does so for one reason. Their purpose is clear, pure, alive. Influence is not manipulation. Influence is alignment. Alignment between what you say and what the listener feels. When your words move in the same direction as the listener's emotions, the story becomes a force, not just a moment. Influence is the ability to guide emotion without pressure, to guide thoughts without force, to guide interpretation without telling people what to think. People resist instructions, but they follow emotions. They trust feelings long before they trust logic. Storytelling becomes influence when it gently shapes the emotional direction of the listener, not by telling them what to do, but by letting them discover what feels true. Influence begins with emotional intention. Your intention must be steady. If your intention is unclear, your story feels scattered. If your intention is clean, your story feels powerful. Your intention carries the energy that surrounds every sentence. A listener may not understand why your story feels strong, but they feel the intention in the tone of your voice. Influence happens when intention becomes vibration. This vibration is the emotional current beneath your words. You cannot fake it. You cannot imitate it. You cannot hide it. Listeners sense the truth of your intention before they hear the meaning of your words. This is why your purpose must be honest. Honesty creates influence. A storyteller influences when they speak from clarity. Clarity of emotion, clarity of direction, clarity of meaning. When you speak with clarity, your story becomes a guiding light through the listener's thoughts. They don't follow your story because you demand it. They follow because the clarity feels easier than confusion. People move toward clarity, the way the body moves toward warmth. This is influence. Another part of influence comes from emotional pacing. Influence does not rush. Influence does not overwhelm. Influence does not explode. Influence guides slowly, softly, quietly, like a tide pulling someone toward the shore without them noticing. Your pacing determines the emotional direction of the listener. If the story rises gently, they rise with it. If the story softens slowly, they soften with it. If the story pauses intentionally, they pause their own thoughts and listen deeper. This shared rhythm is influence. You are not controlling the listener. You are connecting with them. You are creating emotional synchrony. Synchrony is the secret of influential storytelling. Synchrony happens when the storyteller's emotions and the listener's emotions move in harmony. This harmony makes the listener feel like the story is happening inside them. This is the deepest level of influence. Influence also comes from emotional framing. Framing is how you shape the emotional meaning of a moment. A moment can feel heavy. A moment can feel hopeful. A moment can feel painful. A moment can feel transformative. You choose which emotional frame the story will rest in. If you frame a moment with fear, the listener feels fear. If you frame it with courage, the listener feels strength. If you frame it with clarity, the listener feels direction. You guide the listener by choosing the frame through which they see the moment. This choice is influence. Influence also grows from vulnerability, not dramatic vulnerability, not forced vulnerability, not theatrical vulnerability, quiet vulnerability, the kind that comes from honesty, from sharing a truth without defending it, without decorating it, without asking for sympathy. Vulnerability becomes influence when it reveals humanity. Humanity creates connection. Connection creates trust. Trust creates influence. A storyteller who admits their uncertainty, their fear, their confusion, their mistake, becomes relatable. Relatability is emotional invitation. When people see themselves inside your story, your influence grows, because people are influenced by reflections of themselves. Your vulnerability must be intentional, not careless. You share what reveals truth, not what seeks validation. You share what deepens the moment, not what distracts from it. A vulnerable moment, placed with care, can change a listener from a spectator into a participant. This is influence. Influence also grows from emotional layering. A single emotion is never enough. Powerful stories carry multiple layers. Fear mixed with courage, pain mixed with clarity, uncertainty mixed with hope. Layers create complexity. Complexity feels real. Realness creates influence. Listeners trust what feels real. Their hearts open to stories that feel human. Your influence deepens when emotion is presented as a spectrum, not a single note. Spectrums feel alive. Single notes feel flat. Another element of influential storytelling is perspective. Perspective is the direction you give the moment. Two people can live the same event, but tell two different stories based on perspective. A painful moment can be framed as loss, or it can be framed as growth. A confusing moment can be framed as struggle, or as clarity arriving slowly. A failure can be framed as ending, or as beginning. Your perspective creates the emotional conclusion the listener reaches. Influence happens when your story guides them toward a perspective that offers understanding, relief, or transformation. You are not telling them what to think. You are showing them a way to think. Influence is guidance without pressure. Another part of influence is consistency. The consistent voice creates trust. A consistent tone creates stability. A consistent rhythm creates familiarity. Consistency makes the listener feel safe inside the story. Safety opens the door to influence. A listener cannot be influenced when their mind is tense. Tension blocks connection. Connection blocks influence. Your consistency creates the emotional environment that makes influence possible. But the deepest influence comes from resonance. Resonance is not sound. Resonance is emotional echo. It is the feeling that remains inside the listener even after the story ends. A story with resonance feels like it belongs to them, not to you. Resonance is created by emotional truth, delivered with clarity. The moment you express truth in a way that feels universal, the listener carries it with them. Truth that stays is influence. Every storyteller has the ability to influence, not by being louder, not by being cleverer, not by being dramatic. Influence comes from the emotional force of honesty, clarity, connection, and presence. This chapter teaches you how influence grows without pressure. But the next chapter, chapter 11, will show you how influence turns into connection, how connection turns into loyalty, and how your storytelling can build relationships that last long beyond the moment. Chapter 11 is where storytelling becomes relationship building.